Today I'm with Rowland Bowker. Hello there, Rowland. How are you?
Not too bad.
Well done. It's going to be quite a novel experience, I think, this, Rowland, for you.
Yeah, I'm not the great lover of modern technology.
Well, the reason why I'm with Rowland is that you're a great traveller, aren't you?
Yeah, I've done a lot of travelling.
How many countries have you visited?
Depends how you define a country. On my rather generous list, I've been to 221. But on that list, the United Kingdom, for instance, counts as 7 countries. So that's how we make the list generous.
Now, if you don't mind me asking you, Rowland, how old are you now?
I'm 80 now.
You're 80. Have you been travelling most of your life, or is it just your adult life?
Oh yes, I mean my father never travelled anywhere, but he never read anything else but travel books. So that's how he started off from early childhood like that, wanting to do a lot of travelling.
Well, what I'd like to talk to you about today, Rowland, is some of the high mountains of some of the countries that you've been to the top of.
Yeah.
So I believe there's certain mountains like Mount Fuji in Japan?
Yes, we've climbed Mount Fuji.
And what was that like?
Well, it's the, what the Japanese say, he who climbs Mount Fuji once is a wise man, he who climbs it twice is a fool. Well, in that, I mean, it's rather a slog up a volcano, and volcanoes are not always enjoyable climbs.
And presumably snow on it when you went up?
No, there wasn't any snow. We went up in September, the snow hadn't arrived by then.
And what about the ascent? How long did that take?
Well, there's a road that goes about halfway up. We took a taxi up that road, for which I had to speak Japanese, a few words, and then from then up to the summit, I think it was about something in the region of 4 hours from about the halfway point.
Did you have to organise or find details out about the ascent before going there?
No, we just read up a little bit, and it's fairly straightforward. You have to find a hotel to stay at near the bottom, and then just arrange transport the day before with a taxi driver to start an early morning taxi ride to start off with.
Now, I understand during your life as well that you've lived in certain and various countries, haven't you?
Yeah, I've lived in several different countries.
You were telling me before Ethiopia you were there
yeah,
for...
I've lived in Ethiopia for a while, Thailand, Malaysia, Turkey, France, Sweden.
So out of those countries, what about their sort of high points?
Yeah, well, when we lived in Ethiopia, we could never get a holiday at the right time of the year to climb the highest mountain, which is Rashdashan. So we went back and climbed Rashdashan about 10 years ago. That's a 1 week trek with mules carrying your food and guides, that sort of thing.
I've always wanted to visit Ethiopia, Rowland, to go travelling, because it looks quite a spectacular country.
It is. The Simien Mountains in Ethiopia are very beautiful mountains, quite spectacular.
And what kind of height would you be talking about for the highest mountain in Ethiopia?
I think it's something in the region of just over 4,000 metres. I can't remember the exact figure.
So was that with your wife as well, Anne?
Pardon?
Was that with your wife, Anne?
Oh yes, Anne came on that trip.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned mules. What was the sort of the total amount of people that were with you, if you had mules with you?
We were just the 2 of us, plus 4 mules, 4 mule drivers, a guide, a compulsory guide, a cook, and a compulsory bodyguard. The bodyguard didn't have much to do apart from scaring the baboons off.
Is it anywhere near to the Eritrean border or not?
It's not all that far away.
So did you come across friendly or quite stubborn baboons?
Oh, baboons in Ethiopia weren't all that fierce. I've come across worse baboons in places like Kenya and so on.
Because they do live quite high up on the mountain plateau, don't they?
I mean, they have the gelada baboon, a rather famous, rather attractive balloon with the heart-shaped red mark on its chest.
Now, what about other mountains in other countries?
Well, some countries you can drive. You can drive a car almost way to the top of the highest hill. In Thailand, for instance, Doi Atheninin is the highest mountain in Thailand. They've built several temples on near to the summit, and they built a tarmac road almost all the way to the top. So it's only 5 minutes walk after you get out of a minibus to the highest point of Thailand.
I was going to say, Rowland, because if it was just a matter of travelling over the very highest point in the minibus, I may have to query you on it and ask whether that is proper bagging.
Well, yes, that's a question of definition, isn't it?
Other mountains that you can think of, countries' high points that you can get very close to, either in minibus or car?
I've been to what is reputed to be the highest point of Saudi Arabia, where there's a tarmac road all the way, but on that occasion the tarmac road went to what they claimed was the highest point. So on that occasion I felt like walking half a mile down the road and walking half a mile back up again to put a little bit of effort into it.
What about some of the more spectacular mountains, Rowland, that you can think of? Because again, these are very exotic places. You're talking about Ethiopia and Japan.
Mount Ararat was one of our most enjoyable expeditions. That was about 6 or 7 days for climbing Mount Ararat, and there'd been a lot of political trouble. There'd been a lot of quarrels over the frontier around there, so a lot of the time Mount Ararat has in the past been out of bounds.
And of course you're talking about Turkey, aren't you now?
Yeah, well, I'm talking about Turkey.
Yeah.
When I lived in Turkey a long time ago for a year, and the whole of eastern Turkey in those days was a military area that you weren't allowed to visit, but that's opened up since, and it was about 12 years ago that Anne and I climbed it in a group.
And of course you're talking about getting up into not excessive altitude, but certainly into the sort of height band that you'd notice the difference and lack of oxygen, aren't you, with Ararat?
I think Ararat, if I remember rightly, was 5,150 metres. I think that is correct.
So in old money that would be verging on about 17,000 odd foot?
I think a little bit less than that.
Yeah,
Over 16,000 anyway.
It's quite high, isn't it?
It is, yes.
How did you find the altitude?
Well, I don't suffer from altitude sickness, but Anne does. Anne has had altitude sickness 3 times when I've been with her, and almost always I've noticed Anne gets altitude sickness very, very close to 5,000 metres. She got altitude sickness on Ararat, but since it was only another 150 metres to the summit, she continued to the summit, and of course with mountain sickness, as soon as you get to lower altitude it goes off.
Would that be the highest mountain that you've been to the summit of, Rowland?
Well, no, Kilimanjaro. I mean, we set out to climb Kilimanjaro in 1967 and had to turn back because of mountain sickness. Now, this was long before Kilimanjaro became such a tourist destination, and it wasn't customary in those days to go right to the very highest point of the crater rim. It was only customary to go as far as the crater rim itself and then descend from that. So I only went as far as the crater rim, whereas when Anne came back years later and did it, she continued right to the highest point, Uhuru Peak, the highest point of the crater rim.
And I believe, I had never been to Kilimanjaro, but I believe one of the fascinating aspects of an ascent is that you go through different sort of tropical fauna and fauna, don't you? That you can sort of set off with some quite spectacular plants lower down, and obviously you're going up onto a very high snow-capped mountain and with glaciers.
Yes, it's very noticeable that there's been a very, very great reduction in the amount of snow. I mean, places where I was floundering in soft snow in 1967, that snow has now disappeared. There's been a big reduction in the amount of snow on Kilimanjaro, but there is still snow on the summit.
What about other exotic destinations?
Well, we've been to some rather odd places, I suppose. We climbed Mount Christoffel, that's the highest point of the island of Curacao in the Caribbean, and we've climbed Mount Scenery, which could be argued is the highest point of Holland, since it is on a Dutch island in the Caribbean, which is officially part of Holland.
What about we've been around Africa, haven't we? You mentioned Kilimanjaro. We've been out around Asia, around Japan. What about North and South America?
Well, we've trekked in South America. We've trekked in the Cordillera Huayhuash in Peru, and we've spent some time in the Towers of Paine National Park in the south of Chile, but we've climbed a few hills there, but I wouldn't say that any of them are really famous, notorious hills like Chimborazo or Aconcagua or anything like that.
What about North America?
In North America, I think we've climbed the highest point in the Rockies, and we climbed Mount Whitney, which is the highest point in the 48 southern states. The highest mountain, of course, in the United States is Mount McKinley, or Denali as it's now called, in Alaska. But we climbed Mount Whitney in the Sierra.
And what was that like as an ascent?
There's a lot of rules and regulations in the United States about climbing hills. You have to get permits. To get a permit to spend more than what it was necessary in those days to get a permit to spend more than one day on it. We were unable to get permits, so we had to do the thing all in one day. So we started out very early in the morning and used every bit of daylight and managed to do it in one day. But nowadays, I understand now, you even have to apply in advance to spend one day on it. So we were lucky to have done it in those days.
What about coming a little bit closer to home, Rowland, around some of the European countries and some of the European mountains?
Yes, well, we've climbed quite a few hills in Europe. I think one of the easiest ones perhaps was Hungary. In 1999 we went to Hungary to see the total solar eclipse, and before seeing the total solar eclipse we climbed the highest hill, which was a very modest hill in Hungary. That was a question of about a 1 hour bus journey from Budapest, and then a modest half an hour walk through the forest to the summit.
And others in Europe?
The Åland Islands, that I count as a country, though officially they're part of Finland. We climbed the highest hill in the Åland Islands. I don't think it's much. I think it's under 200 metres high. I think it's only about 120 or 130 metres. It was a bit more exciting than we expected. The last bit was a rock climb, but I mean, conveniently they put a ladder there for it, so I was able to manage the summit of that one. Now,
I know you still are doing some hill walks in Britain, aren't you? But are you still planning on visiting mountains abroad and getting to their summits?
Well, if there's, we had considered some of the easier tops, the highest point in Denmark, the highest point in Belgium, and things like that. That we might fit one or two of those in this summer. I don't know yet.
Well, Rowland, it's been an utter pleasure for me to talk with you today, and it's been absolutely fascinating on our little mini world trek and mini tour for the last few minutes. So, Rowland Bowker, many thanks.
All right, okay.